Hey, welcome to to this edition of Rally's Founders Talks. One of the things about Rally is that our goal is to turn or transform Orlando into an international hub of social entrepreneurship, and so we simply believe that any social entrepreneur that is starting up and beginning that journey, they should take a stop through here. And the reason why is because we have all the talent and resources that can enable them to be successful in their journey. And so you represent one of those pieces. And so we're happy to have you here today. And so really quickly, or as much time as you want, give us a little introduction about just overall, just who you are. Like, let them know the scope of this wonderful resource that's sitting in front of us.
Well, thanks for that, Kyle. Good morning to you and to the rest of the entrepreneurs on the team for Rally. I'm honored to be a part of this. So quickly, born and raised in Florida, met my wife. We got married a month out of college, so I've been married 25 years next summer. And it's just been an amazing journey. Started out working in the for-profit space, mainly in the areas of real estate, banking, and private equity. Learned a lot there. Had a health scare in my late 30s, which really was a big pivot point for me. I was 38 years old. Our fourth child was only about 3 weeks old, and ended up going to MD Anderson in Houston. I had half my liver removed. It turns out that I did not have cancer, but it was certainly a very scary summer for us, 2008, trying to sort out my health situation. But when I got out of that, what I realized was I immensely enjoyed being on airplanes every week and the thrill of the deal and all the different things I got to do in a business like CNL, but realized there was a yearning underneath that perhaps there was something different for me. And so I started really over about a 2-year process trying to think through what could be next if I didn't stay at CNL. Right. And I remember somebody telling me, you really have to know thyself to be able to propel towards your passions and what you may be best at. And so I realized that, and I'm sure like many of you on this call are driven, entrepreneurial, work all the time, like creative drivers. And I had just been in a blur of activity for 15 years. And so to step back and really start to know thyself was a hard discipline and unsettling in a lot of ways. And I started to move towards 3 words that define what I've been doing more currently, which one was Orlando. I was from here, even though I had gone to school in Chicago and overseas in England, this was home. And I had actually looked at potentially running for Congress. And one of the consultants that I was working with, they had made a comment to say, hey, Tim, as much as I know you're from here, you've really never done anything for Orlando. And it was hard to hear that, but he was right, because I had always been running around on airplanes doing things all over the country. And it struck me, I wanted to do something for Orlando. So Orlando was one word. The second word was generosity and philanthropy. I always realized at the end of the day, at work, if I had something that I had done during the day around giving or generosity or philanthropy, I got energized by that. So Orlando, philanthropy, generosity, and then the third was family-owned businesses. I was just had grown up in a family-owned business, had been around a lot of that. You all are now creating these businesses, and there's a certain culture and excitement around that really energized me. And I wanted to be a part of that, and I didn't know what that looked like. So interestingly, we ended up taking some time after I left the company, a bit of like a sabbatical. We moved.
CNL?
What's that?
When you say when you left the company, are you talking about CNL?
Yes, sorry, Kyle.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I left the company, we took some time actually just to step back and really process what was next. We moved our family to Australia, of all places, and so we had 4 kids and basically a newborn baby, and that was where it started to shape for us as to what was next. And so that's a bit of my story in terms of the for-profit world, healthcare, and now I've been working with NCF, National Christian Foundation, for about 8 years now.
Yeah.
One thing I want to double tap on there, Tim, is when you were talking about this, like, always driving, the personality that's driven to succeed, and that I think that sometimes it's easy to scapegoat that in for-profit businesses, to say, oh, the for-profit entrepreneur or CEO that's always working is clearly a problem. But what's interesting is, even in cause-based businesses, I see a lot success style personalities that put the cause above their own health, vitality, wellness, take that same driving energy and kind of make it unassailable by putting it towards a worthy cause, and then promptly take the same attitude. And so that, like, process of taking a step back to the way you described, to know yourself, was that a hard thing to kind of pause that success, that driver mentality? And did you have to develop any new skills, or was there some, like, feelings of, oh man, I can't stop working? Like, how did you do that? I know I have some social entrepreneur friends who can't give themselves permission because the cause is so laudable to pause. They're just worried that everything will fail if they pause to get to know themselves a little bit more, or temper their workflow. Can you talk a little bit, if you had to learn some new skills in order to do that?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a great question. I think the inner machinery of an entrepreneur, whether you're for-profit or not-for-profit, is that wiring is probably similar. And so you can get crazy for the cause for-profit, or you can get crazy for the cause nonprofit, and you still have the same challenges going on in terms of imbalances and those kinds of things. You're right. I've seen probably just as many nonprofit leaders struggle with that balance. Now, in the for-profit realm, it's you're chasing money and you rationalize things at a very high level. Well, it's just, I made X this year and I'm just going to keep doing that. And you're right, over here, it's more the cause, which is, it's a worthy cause. I clipped this last night when I was prepping for this. This is in my journal from 2012, and it speaks right then to your comment. My inner murmur and inner machinery never stops. There's work underneath the work because my effort will never be enough. Why did I just sleep 3 nights in a row in sub-freezing temperatures in a tent? Perhaps REM or REM sleep of the soul is finally coming for me. And it was like, I didn't ever, like you said, give my permission, because I think a lot of my identity became built around performance and scorecard, if you will. And a lot of the ways I think America measures scorecard is the money you earn, or the venture you started, or the success you've had. And then I go on to write, my work at CNO was driven partly by healthy things. I love the word competition, but partly by unhealthy things: money, titles, significance, guilt, winning approval of others. Having to prove yourself makes you soul weary. The overworking in my soul, the busyness was stimulating, but also defining. I produced. I was a producer. I made money. Producers are well paid for being busy. This scorecard mentality must stop. So I wrote that 8 years ago, but I mean, that's still something I have to work with now. And I know everybody probably on this call identifies partly with this, because partly why you're in the seat is because you're driven like that. And so it's like, how do we find these counterbalances? That's one of the things I love. Ben and I are in this group that we get together once a month, and we talk about a few categories of life to try to help find balance in that, you know, around time, money, imagination, decision-making, power, community. And I think outside of having strong community to really walk you through like what you're doing here, it can easily get out of balance. So not to get hung up on that, but I do think it's an important part of the entrepreneurial journey is knowing thyself, having some degree of space to step back sometimes and think through like what's the work under the work, if you will.
Yeah.
So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I want to go. So I want to hang on those two things: knowing thyself, and then the second thing was giving your time, your ability to rest or space. And but the first one is knowing thyself. So apparently, well, prior to you coming to where you are today, you were involved in CNL at a high level. You said, you know, you were driven by things that were healthy. There are other things that are driven by unhealthy. Was when you're arriving to the understanding of, wait, hold on, I have to stop because I don't really think that I understand myself. Was there moments throughout your journey that you felt like something was like not aligned, or
Right.
or was it just like, was it always an inkling? Because I, like, for me, like through my journey, there were always like these inflection points where there were inklings like, man, like I was constantly struggling, like, is this the thing I'm supposed to be doing? If, or, you know, if I die tomorrow, what will people think about me? Because I felt like I was not where I was supposed to be. And then all of a sudden an event occurred for you. You said that it was a health crisis. For me, it was getting, you know, laid off of a very well-paying job that I built my entire life on. Well, I jumped to another position, which was very well-paying, built my life on that, and then they get merged, and then I'm first in or last in, so I'm first out, and as a result, I get laid off right as the financial crisis is hitting. And all of a sudden, this financial, like, my situation just changed. And for me, it was like, wait, hold on. That was the moment for me. So I guess the question is, was that always an inkling you had? And then was it the health thing that was like the thing that just kind of took it and said, okay, I got to grab a hold of this and move forward?
Yeah, I would say maybe the disconcerting part of it, Kyle, for me was that the health crisis actually made me start to think about all this. Outside of it, I don't think I would have ever stopped. And so I think in some ordained way, that was the plan for my life, was like, hey, this was going to happen. And so I guess maybe my encouragement in that is, don't let, you know, losing your dream job like Kyle or me, like with a health scare, don't let some cataclysmic event potentially be the thing that makes you have to sit back and reflect. Like, try to like inculcate that into your rhythms, because otherwise you're kind of living out of crisis. Healthy. I think something that's real positive is creating intellectual curiosity in your journey. Like, one thing Ben's told me, like, always have a novel going. That may sound kind of silly, but having a story outside of your own story that's helping you not just live all the time here, that's been a really creative outlet for me. And, you know, I was reading recently Jim Collins, he's talking about, you all have probably heard this flywheel concept that Jim Collins talks about, how do you get a really heavy wheel, and the piece that he writes, like, think of a 5,000-pound wheel. How do you even get that thing to start moving? And he talks about your personal flywheel. So, like, what is it for you in your personal journey that enables you to have a flywheel? And for him, he has put 1,000 creative hours in for 20 plus years. He has to, and you think about the math of that, it's like 4 hours a day. It's not a massive amount, but for him, writing and being creative, that has been part of how he writes. That's part of how he does things. So I've wondered about that for me, like, what's my personal flywheel like? And I think a lot of it is intellectual curiosity. So I think not only do you want to like step back and reflect and say, who am I, know thyself, but I also think there's a degree of being intellectually curious about all these things and how does it fit, and then how does your journey fit along the way.
Yeah.
So hopefully I answer your question, Kyle.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool, especially for the entrepreneurs on the call. The place that you're at right now is very easy and sometimes very helpful to get really tunnel visioned down on your project, right? And the next step and the next problem. It's very easy to have your whole world kind of shrink down to the thing that you're doing. But what I hear Tim saying and what I hear him quoting Jim Collins saying is that things get better when you do something that's a little bit counterintuitive, and that's introduce intellectual curiosity, peripheral energy, so that you get to know yourself and you're not a single-minded producer, busy producer, but you're a full person that then is leveraging that full humanity towards this problem that's worth solving. You're not merely a tool turning out a machine that addresses a problem. That can be a hard counterintuitive thing when you see such good work in front of you for such a laudable cause. So I think social entrepreneurs are particularly at risk of this tunnel vision thing because our businesses are pointed at such laudable cause, but will be less and less effective as we do that over time.
So Tim, I actually, like Ben, you alluded to you and Ben being part of this group, and he passed me this little book called the Book of Life, and it was interesting as I was reading through it. There were some things in there that I naturally knew I had to do, but the book provided some clarity around why it was important, and you talk about this thing where you needed to rest, right, and give yourself that space. And so one of the things that I think that was interesting is that it's this concept of that you have these things in your life and you need to be present there and set boundaries around other things, and so you have to take care of those things. And so in order to do that, you have to rest one and pick up the other, and then rest another, and then rest that thing and pick up another, because all of you have to take care of. And so walk us through, and I don't mean this to be prescriptive, but how does an entrepreneur create the realm or the rest in their lives? It's like for me, one of the things is like I do have work, but I also but there's a time where I try to be active in putting that down. So I don't like to work on weekends. I don't like to work at night because I need to be at home present with my family. And it's during those times where all of a sudden my mind is resting and I come away with a better frame of thought on what I was doing the previous day, or a new thought or whatever. And so it feels counterintuitive because it feels like if I put this thing down that I'm working really hard to build, like something's going to get lost. But the reality is when I put it down, it actually gets better when I pick it up again. So talk to us about kind of like your thoughts around the activity of creating rest or REM in the work.
Sure. And I'll maybe just to put a bow on that last point. If think about y'all's desire, everybody wants to create societal renewal, right? You're all working on these incredible projects. Well, if you back that up, you have to have organizational renewal, right? To be able to get societal renewal. And behind organizational renewal is individual renewal. So if you're not like having rhythms to individually renew yourself, it's going to be really hard to do that for organization, and then in turn do that for society. So it may feel selfish, like I don't have margin for that, I don't have time for that, but like ultimately I think the societal change that will come from healthy entrepreneurs is demonstrably better, right? It's just better. So that's one thing. In terms of your point, in terms of how to create rhythms, I've just been lousy at this, but in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, I think because I've realized, oh my gosh, my kids are going to go to college. Like I'm launching these children off. I want to really cherish these years before now more at home. And I read a guy, his name is Andy Crouch, and he was at the Templeton Foundation for a number of years. Now he's a senior fellow at Praxis, which is up in New York City. And he wrote a book, and he came up with 3 things. He said, if you only get one thing out of the book, these 3 things are the takeaway with regards to a structure. 1, try to have a block of time every day that you're not on your screen, right? So maybe that's at 8 p.m. You just say, my screens are off. Try to have a block every week where you're off screens for renewal, right? So it may be, for me, it's Sundays, right? It's church day, the Sabbath, that's our day. And then take 1 week a year. This is harder. Try to take 1 week a year where you are, and this could be writing, reflecting, maybe it's time with your family, no screens. So if you can establish that rhythm. The other thing he does, which I really liked, I was actually at a meeting with him, and he told me he did this. He says, every day I wake up, he lives in Philly, I go outside before I look at my phone. I have to just believe I'm part of something bigger. I just breathe in the air, whether it's cold out or it's hot out. I just go outside with my coffee, 5 minutes. Okay, I'm a part of this thing here. And then I'm going to go back in on my little screen. And so I saw him actually the next morning outside. He went out with his coffee and he was outside. And I was like, wow, that's a really great rhythm, because a lot of times, 71% of Americans sleep with their phone by their bed. And so the immediate thing they're doing is just going right here, and it can be tunnel vision. So I think for rhythms, that's a helpful one. We've done that the last 2 years with our family, which is hard with 5 kids, where we do the 1 weeker with no screens, and it's just been beautiful, amazing. And we're grateful to be able to do that, but it's been, yeah. And then, I mean, the other thing I would add for me, there's strength finders and the Enneagram, and there's all these different Myers-Briggs, all these different tests you can do. That can be part of Know Thyself. But, a book that Carrie Coates, I saw, Kyle, you and I have a common friend on LinkedIn, Carrie Coates. She coached me last year as my executive coach. And she gave me a book, which is actually, I'm reading right now, called Emotional Intelligence. And I think it's very easy when you're super busy and go, to miss sometimes being present. And so this was something that she was talking to me about, and I've just found this to be very helpful. It has like 65 practical ways, essentially, to think about EQ, which is really built around how do you be present with people. So this is another thing I've been working on, and I would say it's somewhat in the category of Know Thyself. It's somewhat in the category of renewal. Those are a couple of ideas based off your question.
Yeah. Ben, is this similar to your slab of salmon and bourbon story in the wilderness?
I don't know what that is, but I want to hear about it, because
I realized a couple of years ago that I was like, the things I normally cared about, I absolutely, if I was honest, did not care about at all. I could, like, because I had built a machine, I could make it look like I continued to care about those things, and I knew the tasks to make it look like I cared about those things, but on the inside, I didn't care about them at all anymore. And I think that this is true for people that work in cause-based space, that are always advocating for a worthwhile cause, always trying to recruit other people to care about the thing that they care about. Your heartfelt passion that's told over and over again can become kind of like a sales pitch that is just words without meaning. And it was significant enough that I thought, either I have got to make a real change and do something I actually believe in, or I've got to uncover this belief again. And so I took several days by myself. I found a friend of a friend who had a house on a barrier island that was very quiet. And I stopped on the way and bought a big bottle of bourbon and a big hunk of salmon and some granola, and spent a couple days in the house by myself, cooked that salmon at the beginning and just ate it in pieces, and drank that bottle of bourbon and didn't talk to anybody for a couple of days, and walked around outside, read one little very simple book that normally I would think was too simple to bother with, but was the right kind of thing to prompt my own thinking. And looking back on it, it's, some people might call it like a silent retreat. It wasn't truly that, because I had the book and the bourbon, but it was restorative for me. It was a choice to be silent and not around people. And I think that it's funny. I didn't
bottle.
getting out of that. What did you say?
So when you finished the bottle, you left? Is that how it
That's
works?
right. Time to go. There's nothing left for me here. That's what I said. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, Ben, you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I like that we got on this topic about understanding yourself, and I think that that's a part of your story in that pivot, Tim. The other part that's really interesting is the way over the last several years you've built the Orlando office of NCF. So you definitely have known yourself, taken time to know yourself, built other priorities, but you also still are a very hard worker. And you built teams and you set goals. Can you talk about a goal, how you use setting goals and metrics to kind of build a team and accomplish a mission? Can you talk a little bit about how you've done that as you've built NCF Orlando?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we've all heard the adage, what gets measured gets done. And so I'm a big fan of scorecards, right? Like trying to figure out what it is that actually will drive the result that you're missionally seeking. So you can come up, any organization can come up with their mission, vision, values, but then taking that and then saying, we want to be over here in 5 years, like what metrics do you have to put in place to get that done? And I love that. I love trying to figure out what those things are. And, you can have leading indicators and lagging indicators and measuring that. Like we have this at the hub where we work downtown, we have this, it's essentially like the supplies room and the printer is in there. And I had heard about this paint that you could put, on a wall and make it like a whiteboard. So we painted one whole wall, which is a decent sized wall. And we have all of our metrics for the whole year up there by month. And so anytime you're always grabbing stuff on the printer, you're just constantly reminded of it. So I think, yeah, it's a really important way to build things. We use this terminology called the tick principle. And as an entrepreneur, it may be helpful because it seems like there's so much noise. Corona's obviously created an enormous amount of disruption in how you run a business or lead a venture. And the tick principle was basically talent, ideas, and capital. And so number one, we all know this, but if you can get great talent, a lot of other stuff just solves itself, right? You look at this on a football field or a basketball court. I was a college basketball player. Like talent just makes up for a lot of stuff, right? That you might miss in strategy, et cetera. So finding like level 5 talent that Collins talks about, like that is so crucial. And I would say a lot of times in startups, you see folks that are willing to hire 3s and 4s versus the 5s, the level 5s, because they're a bit impatient, like wait for those 5s. And then when you get them, retain them, right? That's just so crucial. So talent. The second one, ideas, that's around strategy. Like what is your idea? And you can have all the talent in the world and capital in the world, but if your idea isn't great, it's going to be hard. And so you really have to have all 3, right? You have to have the talent, you have to have the ideas, and then you have to have capital, right? Which to make it run. And so that's a key part of the metrics. I've run into a number of people where they have talent and a cool idea and they just don't have capital. So you have to put those 3 things together. And it's almost like if you have on your daily, to-do list, like how do I move my organization down the track with talent, ideas, and capital? If you do that every day, that flywheel will actually be productive.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just add, maybe in the context of ideas, it's very easy to get focused on you know, instead of thinking about the actual weather or the climate, rather, we're focused on the weather. And it's like, what is actually really happening? So we see something and it's stormy out, and we start to ideate around, well, there's a storm today and it rained yesterday too. And we're not even thinking about the climate or the season that we're in. And then you miss the big picture. So in your ideas and in your strategy building, how are you able to, and a lot of times that's just reading, right, across various disciplines. How do you like really dive in and figure out where is this thing going? From a strategy standpoint. And then lastly, Ben, you and I talked about this. It's easy sometimes for executors and this is in the ideas bucket as well. You get so focused on tactics that you sometimes lose the bigger vision of the strategy. And so it's like, how do you really focus on climate versus weather, like big picture stuff? And then how do you really make sure, all right, this is my strategy and this is how I'm going to execute on that, versus just getting day to day just tied up in the tactics of the thing. So those are a couple other maybe framing points that I've found to be helpful. And I'll just add, so when I was in at CNL, we had strategic business units. So we had like 8 or 9 different businesses, and they all had their own P&L. And we treated them like their own business. So I got to see 8 or 9 constantly operating, and I got to launch a nonprofit, which has been fun. And now I work with a lot of our givers who are founders or business owners. So I've been able to see SBUs running the nonprofit, founder, like I've been able to see a lot of different parts of it. And I feel like without some discipline on talent, ideas, and capital, things really can go sideways on you. So just another perspective.
Yeah, I what's funny is you talk about all those things, none of them can be accomplished without the things you talked about previously, which is knowing thyself and resting. Because I don't know where you can, like in the busyness of the day to day, when you're trying to build something, you don't have the tendency is to get caught within the issues and things that you're trying, the tasks that you're trying to accomplish in that moment. And unless you're pulling back or resting those things and pulling back, you won't be able to have the space to be able to understand what's happening, to build strategy, to handle or tackle what's happening, or to at least build it around what's happening, and then to be able to come up with those metrics, to be able to monitor, that will allow you to then know thyself, right? Like, that's what the metrics are telling you. Okay, this is who you are, or at least this is what your work is doing. And it's so like, it's really, I think it's really helpful you talking about the importance of resting, the importance of knowing thyself, and how that really plays out in all the other components of the business or building a business.
Well, and it ties into this talent, ideas, and capital principle. Mm-hmm. If your capital is not patient capital, then it's going to be hard for you to be reflective and thoughtful and ideate in a proper, a rhythm. And so that it all goes together. You want to find partners who actually line up with how you want to do life on the capital side. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I really like the way you described too that whiteboard in the copy room, like, and that you can, that what you measure, what's the quote that you had, like
what gets measured gets done.
Yeah. What gets measured gets done. And I feel like it's maybe a typical, a personality type. So it's not every entrepreneur, but I think some entrepreneurs are very intuitive in the way that they move forward. So for me, it was like the idea of stopping to build metrics and then tools to capture those metrics felt like a waste of time. Like, I knew intuitively what I needed to do. Like, don't bother me with having to build a structure and with numbers and math. But the further I've gotten down and listened to successful people, like, I was amazed. I was listening to the Marketplace podcast where they interview CEOs. I think it's called Corner Office. And how many times they would talk to the CEO of Home Depot, And he gets up, and after his morning ritual, the first thing he looks at are the sales numbers at a couple of key indicator stores. Like, he actually looks at individual stores' sales numbers every day and compares them to the week before, the month before, and the year before, right? And he's running the whole thing. And that's when I started to realize, oh man, the right metrics are really, really important. And they're important from the very beginning on. If you get the wrong ones, it'll be a problem. But getting the right ones and then putting them in front of yourself all the time seems like the successful entrepreneurs are doing that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's really cool to hear you say that.
Well, and then, so I would say, you know, we just finished year 8, and there's 30 offices around the country for NCF. We've been one of the fastest growing affiliates, so we've had a really fun time with it. But I would say 80% of the goals that we came up with in the first 12 months are still our goals. But I think it's really good to explore. I would say every year we try another 2 or 3 things that we measure to try to see, like, is there anything here? And, you know, so what we have now is a little different than we had 7 or 8 years ago, but we're constantly learning. The other thing that's interesting, so for us, if we just had one thing to measure, it's how many dollars are we deploying from our families to charity. And we're about to hit $200 million. That was a goal. We had $200 million by 2020. That was our goal, and we're going to hit it in like 30 days. So we're really excited about that. But if that is the goal, you have to back up from the amount of dollars going to charity. First off, families have to put money in their giving funds for it to get deployed to charity, right? So then we say, well, how do we get families to put dollars into their giving funds? Well, you go meet with them and you talk with them. And so we are measuring activity. So we have all these things we measure that are down here that then will create contributions that will in turn create grants. So some would say, well, I'm just looking at contributions and grants this year. That's my big focus. And it's like that contributions and grants is what's going to happen if you do all this other stuff over here. And so it's like you have to drive the activity part of it to get to this, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's something that I have been real big on with our team, is like, let's get underneath what's actually going to produce that 200 million. There's about 7 things behind that, and how do we just nail every single one of those to get to that? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, because it's what's funny is, or interesting, is that we use this thing called the social lean business model canvas, and as you were talking through that example of all these activities that drive stuff, that drives ultimately the giving, or the amount of dollars that you're able to give away. It's interesting that revenue, I think there's like 12 slots, and revenue sits way at the back end. It's like number 8 or 9 or 10 maybe. And I came to the realization as you were talking, is that there are all of these other things, these other activities that have to occur in order for you to get there, and that you have to do those activities correctly, right? You have to obviously understand who your customer is. You have to understand clearly understand what the problem is, the unique value proposition, the activity of understanding how do you get your product in front of them, and measuring that. I mean, there's tons of stuff, and so what you said was really important for our entrepreneurs to understand, is that yeah, it's great obviously to focus on revenue or sales, but there's all these other activities that we need to measure or take care of that help us get there, and let's not lose sight of those. Let's not your entire thing be, okay, sales, the number of revenue you produce, and the amount of impact, but there's other things that you should be taking care of. If you do those things well, then it'll help you create revenue and impact.
Yeah, you're right. And the other part of it, and you all are already doing this, but creating deliberate community, right, where you're having these conversations. I don't know how much you all have gotten into governance, but so much of what you just discussed, Kyle, like getting the right metrics, driving towards the right things, staying on mission, not having mission drift, is around governance. So it's your community of people like this that say, hey, I think that's not really going to hit where you want to go. But if you build a board one day, having like-minded board members. It wouldn't be in the talent, ideas, and capital 3, but governance would probably be the next really big thing, right? So how do you put people around you who care about you, who will stretch your thinking, who will push you to really come up with those metrics that are the ones that you should be driving towards? That's a really big deal. I've seen a lot of governance structures, because we had public entities and private entities in the business, and now with the entrepreneurs that we work with. And the governance, if it's not set up right and it doesn't have the right folks on it, it will totally ruin your venture. And so that's a huge part of, as you build this, making sure you, for example, and here's where we get practical. There may be somebody who would be willing to put a lot of money into your effort, but they're going to want a lot of control and decision making, and it could be a total nightmare for you. And so you have to step back and say, is that somebody I want to partner with and just do day-to-day life with? I need their capital, but I don't want that. So you got to find these partners, right, that could give you capital and help you in your business and your ventures, but also be people you want to do life with. And that's a huge deal, especially if you have a long-term approach to this. Like, I want to do this for 5, 10, 15 years. That could be painful if you pick the wrong partners, right?
Yeah, I liked what you were saying about on the metrics that they evolve, that you try out different ones too. And I was thinking about NCF being 8 years old and maybe trying one for a year. And I think that entrepreneurs on the call, you'll definitely have some baseline ones that you will definitely need to measure. Rob Panapinto, one of our rally makers, always talks about wanting to understand your gross profit and then your net, and understand the difference between the two of them, and making sure that you're building something that has the potential for margin in it. There are some non-negotiables, but I can imagine that the life cycle on the metrics in our early stages will be even quicker, so that you might want to be reevaluating what metrics you're looking at every 3 months instead of every year, where you come back to them and going, is this one helpful? Is this one driving me in the right place? I think the metric that we use is really determinate, like to Tim's point, what you measure is how you succeed or where you move. And so determining the right thing to measure. One of my favorite examples is from a fellow of ours from a couple cohorts ago, who had a learning platform where they gamified literacy. So they put reading comprehension as the way to advance in a really compelling game for elementary school students, right? And they had been measuring users in the game, but they realized that they had this big number of users, but not all the users were actively engaged. So the tool of helping them combat illiteracy or learn to read was only effective if they were actually using the game repeatedly. But they weren't measuring users, like active users. They were measuring just people who had signed up for the game. So they created a new metric around learners. Let's measure how many learners we have, right? And then they quantified that and said a learner is someone who engages this many times in the game over this period of time. Their metric was much less compelling because it was a way smaller number, but now this actually measured the thing that they really wanted to see accomplished in the world. And it drove their success. It drove greater business success, because now they're really focusing on who's actually engaged, not just who signed up. But it also drove better mission success, because they were actually measuring literacy. So picking the right measurement is really important. And I think in the early stage, you have to be open to evaluating those measures frequently, as often as every quarter, right? Are these the right things? Are they driving me in the right direction, or are they spurring action that doesn't help?
Yeah. Exactly. Tim, we got about 10 minutes before we open it up in Q&A. What I want to do is you've said some nuggets, and it's okay if you repeat them. But if we want people, our fellows, and those who watch this later on, to walk away with at least one or two, or two or three nuggets of wisdom that they can take and implement, that are practical. What would be? Could you name a few, or give a few nuggets, lay down a few nuggets of wisdom, and just put some context around each one for our fellows and viewers?
Sure. Yeah, we could do like a little review. I think, one would be to explore what is your personal flywheel. We talked about that earlier. Like, what is that for you? I realize that I'm highly curious. I read a lot. So I am always trying to connect these ideas, and I'm a learner. So like, I think if my intellectual curiosity is always moving forward, like Jim Collins is with his creative hours, good things are going to happen. And I'm going to get to places where I feel like I can impact society in a positive way, and I'm going to be fulfilled. So maybe think through personal flywheel. That'd be number one. Maybe number two, how do you create personal rhythms in your life for renewal? So when you think about, your ability to reflect and to be healthy and to really think through, know thyself. How do you create rhythms for know thyself? Perhaps that's number two. Number three, I'd probably say, is this: how do you apply the tick principle to your business? Like, where you're just very deliberately and intently moving your venture down the field with talent, ideas, and capital on a daily basis. Don't let days go by where you're not moving those down the field. Trying to think if there's a fourth. Yeah, those would be three big ones.
Can you qualify what you mean when you say personal flywheel?
Yeah.
Like, what gets your personal life moving in the direction that you want? Can you say just a little bit more about that? What that means?
I think it's probably, the flywheel effect for your business can be back to what we were saying. If you like, for us, I decided if I did 400 meetings a year for 10 years, we would have a flywheel effect of activity that would create a lot of folks opening giving funds, that would create a lot of dollars going to charity. Like, that was one of my flywheel ideas for the NCF. And so for you personally, and maybe it's for your venture. What is the flywheel for your venture? You could say it that way. Or what is the flywheel for you personally to be able to renew and rejuvenate and to be a healthy leader? Not just, for me, I didn't mention this, but part of my journey was, when I did go, and when I had this health scare and I was in Houston, I realized I didn't really love what I saw as a dad, as a husband, as a father, as a son, as a brother. There was certain relational things breaking down because I was traveling so much, and I wasn't really able to be very present when I was in conversations, and I didn't like that. And so it's like, how do you have a flywheel personally where you're renewing yourself? And then how do you identify that for your venture?
I love that you set the goal of 400 meetings in the year. Just do the math. That's 8 a week. You're moving. That's
well,
good.
It's funny. I think of 8 meetings a week. I'm like, that's not that many. Is that too low? But then the thing is, with everything else going on, and if you do it, it's like a long obedience in the same direction. Like, if you just do that year over year. And by the way, this brings up another point. So some have said, how's your affiliate or how's your office been so successful the last 8 years? Part of it is we've probably had a dozen different ideas come at us, and they're like, hey, why don't you tuck this underneath your thing? Or why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? We're like, no. Like, we just said, we're just very focused on that 200 million to charity. And so you'll all have that, right? You're going to have distractions. You're going to have people that want to bolt on with you, or they're going to want to take you in a different direction. And so I think a lot of it is really focusing in on, like, what is your mission, staying true to that, and then figuring out how to renew yourself along the way. So that, back to the point we were talking earlier, like, if ultimately society is going to be renewed. Your organization has to be renewed, and you have to be renewed. There has to be rhythms in that.
Yeah. Have you put metrics around how many hugs you give your wife and your kids? I feel like you like I talk to my wife. My goal is to talk to my wife for 2 hours a week on this topic. Like, is it down to that granular for you?
It's not. she's actually walking around some houses. She should come and answer that herself. But I would say that my son is a freshman in college, and he and I were talking just 2 days ago. It was his birthday. I said, "How you doing?" It's a month into school. He said, "I'm really," and he's a good student and he's a great kid. He said, "Dad, I'm really struggling with time management." And he's like, it's a different schedule in college. I said, "Yeah." And so one of the things I do is I try to write down, I call it my big three every week. And then I have a big three every day. And I try to then take those big three and I actually schedule them, right? So like, I want to work on this project. And then I look at my calendar and I'm like, wow, I'm going to have to put it right there, 90-minute block. And I schedule it. So, because I find, what gets measured gets done. For me, what gets scheduled gets done.
Yeah.
And so with Michelle, as 10 o'clock, kids go to sleep, we try to just get a half hour on the couch to hang out and talk. Friday nights at 5 p.m., like that's our block. We go have drinks and have dinner, so it's like just putting it in there and being intentional. So it's less around like, like I have a whiteboard at home with time with kids or family, but more like I'm going to go on a run. I know my 14-year-old daughter likes to run. Rachel, will you run with me? Like you just constantly trying to figure out how can I spend time with them intentionally? And I mean, even to the point where if I'm traveling and there's a game and I'm in New York, I fly home for the game. I'll have dinner with everybody. I'll sleep there, have breakfast, and then I'll go to my next city. Instead of going from New York to my next city, I come home. So like just being like really intentional about that.
That's really
which
cool.
I wasn't always very good at. So I've just had to work at it.
And I think that the fact that, that's the process of knowing thyself, right? And having the rest where you can reflect about who you are and where you want to go. The other thing that you said that was interesting is that people come at you in different directions about things. And because you have an understanding of who you are personally, and then also as a business, you're able to really filter out what opportunities you take or not that are aligned with that or that push that forward. So for example, myself, there's this personal mission that I fly over in my life, and I filter everything through there. And the question that I ask myself is that, does this thing help me push this thing forward? And if not, then I don't need to deal with it, right? Does it add value to that? And so I do that. And so I really like the fact that when you said that people come at you with different things, it's like, no, because you've determined that you understand who you are, the direction you're going, and you've determined that these things don't add as much value or no value at all to help you move that ultimate mission forward. But understanding clearly what that is, your mission is, or your purpose is critical in that. If not, then you'll get distracted and yo-yoed all over the place. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, fellows, I want to open it up to you folks. If you have any questions, let me pull this open here. If you have any questions, this is the time now to ask.
Tim, I really appreciate you, sharing those tangible examples of prioritizing time with your family and setting boundaries, because, that's a challenge both in a traditional workplace, but also in, as an entrepreneur, because everything is always kind of on fire. And if you don't prioritize it and set those boundaries and schedule it, it's not something that happens by itself. It has to be intentional. So it's not really a question. I just wanted to thank you for sharing that. I think it's very powerful.
Well, I'd add one thing. I appreciate that. But, I'm just learning as I go. One of the things I learned, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, I'm always on my phone in the car. And so I would come home and I would get in my driveway. My kids would see me, and they haven't seen me all day. And sometimes I wouldn't even see them in the mornings. And then they come up, daddy, daddy. And the first thing they get is, I'm on just wait, I'm on the phone. And so in their mind, it's like, I haven't seen dad all day and I want to see him, and he can't see me right now. And so a friend of mine said, if you're on the phone, you just stay at the end of the street around the corner where they can't see you, because sometimes they're out on their bikes. And when you're done on your phone call, then drive up. And when you get there, be there. And I just had to learn that, right? Like, I didn't know that. And so now, like, when I get home, I get out of the car and I am engaged. And before, it's not that I love my kids more now than I did. It's just, I didn't know how to do it. And so I just been learning, so.
That's so interesting you said that, because I'm happy to hear you say that, because on my way home, one of the things, I don't like taking phone calls once I get into the house, because as you said, like, I just want to be fully present for
Right.
my wife and my kid. And what I have a tendency to do is to stop up near the top of the street where the Target is. There's like this space. I always pull into it, and I finish whatever call, and then once I'm done, right? And so it's really, really interesting that you said that, because I was just like, maybe I felt like I should be getting home, like I should hang up on the call and I should get home. Like, why am I sitting here? And maybe I shouldn't do that. But then I'm thinking, like, okay, based on what you're saying, like, that's actually a good practice. Like, take care of that. And then the reason is because when you go in the house, you just want to be fully present.
And sometimes I've used it where I'll be on a call and I want to be on the call, but I'll just say, you know what? I've been at the end of my street for 30 minutes. My kids, I can see them down there in the yard, and I've got to go. And they respect that. I rarely get people like, I can't believe that you're committed to that.
Such a crummy guy.
So,
the thing that made it possible for me was a friend of mine told me, you're living as though once you put out this fire, there won't be more. You got to start getting used to the reality that there will always be fires burning, no matter how many you put out. So at some point, you're going to stop, and the fires will still be there tomorrow morning. You can start back to work putting them out then. Don't keep thinking that once you get this one done, then it'll all be fine. It's not how it works. Yeah.
Well, and I'll share. When I was at CNL, that there were 6 of us on the executive committee. And 4 of us were pretty good about taking time off on the weekends, but sometimes you had to work on the weekend. And there was this, and I won't name names, he's actually a really good friend, so I'm not, but it's just an interesting example. He works 7 days a week. And I would get to work I always, for the most part, would take Sunday off. Even if I had to work Saturday, I'd take Sunday off. And I had that one day, and it was, there's this, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Dan Sullivan created this time management system years ago, and called free, focus, and buffer days. So, and free days are 24 hours. And for me, being an investor, philanthropist, whatever, if I look at the Wall Street Journal, my brain goes to work. I can't read the journal. That's work. And so I don't even have the journal on the week. On my day off, if it's going to be a free day, I can't look at email. I can't look at the journal. I can't make a phone call. I can do nothing. And I found if I had one 24-hour block a week, if it was that Sunday, when I came back to work on Monday, the dudes that were working on the weekends, like I was fresher on it. Like, it's just a different, and I would argue, I don't want to say outproduced them. That's not maybe a fair way to say it. I was as productive or more productive than them working 6 days a week or less than working 7 days a week and never getting a break, if that makes sense. And I think that's partly the way our bodies are made, right? Like, we're just made for renewal. And by the way, just to keep going on that, I should have mentioned that earlier. That's been really helpful for me in my time, how I set my time. So a free day is 24 hours with absolutely no work, right? And you try to get at least one a week for that. And then a focus day is your best, you focused your best energy on revenue producing activity, right? So for me, that's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Monday is my team day. So we meet as a team. I do my one-on-ones. We do team meetings. I talk to my board chair. Like, that's all on Mondays. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, revenue producing. Fridays is cleanups and reading and buffer. Essentially, like, just cleaning up what I just did all week. And so you kind of have Mondays and Fridays as buffer days, and then you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays as focus days, and then you try to get one free day. And that rhythm, I've found, otherwise your calendar is just kind of all over the place. And now, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting up, if somebody says, I need to meet you at, Friday at 6 a.m. and they could be a partner, you just do it, right? In some cases, you just don't have choices like that. But as you go forward, I think those rhythms are really helpful. What are you laughing at, Ben?
I'm laughing at, if, as an entrepreneur, if someone's willing to give you money, you take the meeting when it happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But you don't say, hey, you know what? I have this new system. It's a buffer day for me. I can't do that. Like, my point is, like, be thoughtful around it, right? It may not always happen, but
yeah. Any other questions from fellows? Abdullah, I know you got some questions, but go ahead, Morgan.
Well, first off, thank you, Tim. All of this hits home. I think that probably a big part of your job at NCF is probably convincing people to lean into their personal flywheel or their personal why and connect that to giving. And at Moto, we're part a nonprofit. So if you had any advice on how to connect people's why to charitable giving.
Yeah, so, one of the things that is interesting with, any time how long has your venture been going, Morgan? How far onto it are you?
We started in January 2020.
Okay. Wow. So you had 60 days of normal, and then, interestingly, I think a lot of even really established for-profits and not-for-profits are acting like startups right now. So everybody's having to be very startup-y in how they do their mindset. But yeah, scripting is really important, like how you message. And if you don't want to take so much time that you can't have revenue producing activities like we just talked about, but nailing that down and even spending some money or like getting community around this to get it right, that the way you frame it and explain it is crucial. And the thing I would say is you script and message stuff in your nonprofit and your ventures is everybody loves a story. And so you can have this great deck and it be beautiful and mission, vision, values and all that. But like, how do you connect stories? So for you and Susan, like, as you think about like your venture, how do you create some stories that will help families connect to that? There's a great book I recently read, a guy named Scott Harrison. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote the book called Thirst. Are you familiar with this? So he founded Charity Water. It's an interesting story just from him going from essentially being like a club promoter in New York City to running Charity Water. That's just interesting by itself. But the second part of it is he is like the master of creating storytelling is so thoughtful, so well done. So like if you ever wanted a good example, I see you nodding. So have you read it?
I haven't read it, but I'm a big fan of Charity Water.
Okay, so if you read Thirst, you can get some ideas on it's just a really practical read and a fun story about like how he took basically his experiences in Africa to Wall Street and everywhere else to raise money. Like how he created a story around that. Hopefully that I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Reid Hoffman actually did his podcast. I remember listening to it. He did one on the guy from Charity Water, and that story was really fascinating. It was built around that. Like, he was an amazing storyteller. And so, I'll find that link and I'll share it in the Slack channel. People.
Yeah, and you all will know this, but you could have 10 ventures all lined up that do the same thing. The best storytellers win. It's just absolutely true. And I mean, unless you have some crazy connection with venture capital or some, but almost always the best stories win. And so is it Story Brand? I'm trying to think of the author of that. I can get this to you, Ben. There's a book it's his whole thesis is around how you do storytelling. It may be helpful for the group.
Yeah. Is that Don Miller?
Don Miller. That's right. Yeah. Story Brand. We've used that in our storytelling, essentially where we make the giver the hero and we are the guide. So we're guiding them. They're the hero. And then the advisors they work with, we want to make superstars. So our three terms are hero. We want to make them the hero. We are the guide, and then we want to make advisors superstars. And that's literally at the top of our little whiteboard in the print room above all of our goals. That's what we're trying to do. So yeah, I would commend both those books, Thirst and Story Brand, to you on that topic.
All right. We got time for one more question?
Oh.
Good? Everybody's good?
Sweet.
Coffee break. Everybody needs coffee.
Yeah. Well, listen, man. The nuggets you gave us in the world are outstanding and shining. We really appreciate you being here today. As we said, you're definitely a great example of why any social entrepreneur should make a stop through Orlando because along their journey. So know thyself, get you some rest, do all that stuff. You'll be great, not only personally, but also in your business venture. So we appreciate your time here today.
Well, I just want to say all the best to you and your ventures. I mean, as you were introducing earlier, I couldn't be more excited about the projects you're working on, and not just here in the U.S., but I didn't realize how global this work that you all were doing is. So all the best to you. Thanks for the opportunity to visit with you, and have a great Tuesday.